David, thanks for being on the podcast, my friend.
I am so excited to be here.
You got a good energy, man. I can see why people like being managed by you and why you've been such a successful CEO over the years. You've really had a laundry list of companies that are very prominent companies that you've been able to manage and be head of, including you just sold 6 months ago. You were involved with the sale of MeetUp, which was kind of fun. It's an app that I use. And so it's always cool when I see, the guys that are, running it or the people behind it for something that I use in my everyday life.
Yeah, MeetUp, I have been using probably for 15 years. I'm obsessed with community. I'm obsessed with the power of community. It's just everything is better with people. Everything. If you have a challenge, if you have a difficulty, if you need support around you, people are there. If you want to do something joyous and you want to go hiking, you want to see the world, everything's better with people. So when Adam Newman, who owned WeWork, had reached out to me to see whether I wanted to be the first outside CEO of MeetUp, I was just like, yes, this is like the dream company because the goal is to end the loneliness epidemic. So it was a special company.
Well, I read that you, when you guys, did a survey of what people were looking for, what they were searching for within the app of MeetUp, they weren't looking for specific types of meetups, hiking or, canoeing or whatever. They were looking for friends, right? And that is the thing that everybody wants is we want to do life with other people.
Yeah. So the Surgeon General of the United States recently produced a 100+ page research document about the epidemic of loneliness. And what you're saying is exactly right. But what's fascinating is how much the pandemic significantly impacted what the top priorities were. So before the pandemic, 2017, number 1 was hiking. Number 2 was tech. Number 3 was book clubs. 2018, hiking, tech, book clubs. 2019, hiking, tech, book clubs. 2020, we had a new number 1 that had never even been in the top 10. And it was just simply finding adult friends. And that was 2021, 22, 23, 24. Consistently, only post-pandemic, it's become the number 1 search term, the number 1 thing that people care about. They don't care about as much what they're doing. They care much more about who they're doing it with.
Well, it's, you can be in the most beautiful place on the planet, but if you're not with people that you enjoy, you're not going to like being there. And you can be in the boringest place in the world, but if you're with close friends, it can be one of the most epic moments of your life. And so I noticed the same thing with the pandemic and everything. That was my big problem with the way they handled it and everything is there's such a mental toll on people when they're not able to connect and get together. And I always say that God brings us together and the devil divides us. But I actually started in 2021, I started a men's community coaching program, and it's really based on helping men to connect and form community. And we got almost 500 members now have joined, and we have something every single day going on. And, the legacy that it's already created in just 3 years, if I died tomorrow, there are hundreds of friendships that'll last forever. And it's been the gift of my life to watch these people to get together. My podcast director sitting next to me, he gets married next week. He met his wife through one of the guys in the community. And, I have hundreds of these stories, and it's all about forming community. And that's why I love what you guys are doing at MeetUp.
It's interesting to give an example for yourself about men's communities, because I think stereotypically people will oftentimes think that women have a stronger sense and focus on community. You'll hear about female communities, and those are really strong, whether it's many women or big book clubs, etc. But one of the most successful communities on MeetUp is actually relatively similar to yours, but a little different, called City Dads. It is a group of dads in New York City who are tired of going to mommy and me classes. They were the only dads there. And they're like, F this, I want to be able to find my people. I want to connect with other dads that are stay-at-home dads, that are primary caregivers, etc. So start off with a group of 5 or 10 dads. Today, there's 60 different, 60, city dad locations in 60 different cities. So some dad moves to St. Louis. And suddenly I got to start a City Dads in St. Louis. Another moves to London. Got to start a City Dads over there. So it's just, the people that get the most out of community are not the people who just show up. That's important. In fact, that's what my teacher says. Show up for each other. But it's the people who start communities. When you start a community, it's just like, that's where you really feel that sense of deep meaning, which, Jimmy, it's so awesome that you get to experience that.
Yeah, I feel like I have my dream job, and it doesn't mean it doesn't come with its struggles and its challenges. You notice this being the CEO of MeetUp, obviously. What are a couple things, I'd love to start with this maybe, what are a couple things that make for a strong community?
Sure. So I always say that people come for the content initially, but they ultimately stay for the people. So it's the ties that people have when they're and building relationships that makes for a strong community. But the key is that a community can't just be different people. You can't have a lot of events where each event is like, 10 different people. The next one, 10 different people. That's not a community. That's just a bunch of events. But a community also isn't one where it's the exact same people over and over again. A strong community is one where you have some consistency of people, but you also have a group, a consistent flow of new people coming into it, because the new people inject this energy, this enthusiasm. And it's a very different experience when new people come in than if it's just the same people, the same running club that's been doing it for 5 or 10 years, et cetera. A Meetup's adage is we use technology to get people off of technology.
I love that.
So
yeah, in a world that's going more and more mobile and online, it's just nice to see, and it's funny, when I was building my real estate career, every week I'd check on MeetUp and see what was going on. Is there a group I can go hiking with? Is there something interesting they're studying? And I just meeting more people. My job was to connect with new people all the time and add them to my database and start marketing to them. And so.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Community helps obviously personal, but also helps big time professional. So it helps you if you're a manager in a group and you're looking to hire people. It helps you in recruiting, right? If you're looking to find clients, in a professional services type situation, it helps you finding clients. It helps you find partners. There's many people that found founders, so co-founders. So it's not just about personal benefits, but there's a huge number of professional benefits that community can provide as well.
Yeah, well, I love what you said about, you don't want it to ever get stale. I've been a part of a lot of different masterminds and communities and church groups or whatever it might be. And part of what I do with my group is I release a new group of 50 guys every 6 months. So every 6 months we add 50 new dudes. And on top of that, we have a tribe that's always growing and changing. So we have like the core 50 so that you have, and you have your guys you can go deeper with, not so much wide, but there's 50. So you're always getting that new connection or that new friend or that new person that you're meeting. And it was funny because, part of my worry was adding new people halfway through the program. It's a 2-year program. And I was like, well, let me try and see how it goes. But those members fit in almost seamlessly because people wanted to meet new people. They wanted to have a few new people to kind of just get to know that they hadn't already experienced.
I love that. It's great. It's like, in college, you have freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. And then like when the freshman class comes in, the people can't wait to meet, the next cohort of people. But I would say the number one thing that's most important in community and the reason why your community is so successful is ultimately because of you. So the organizer of the community is the difference. You could have 2 hiking groups in Brooklyn, like the exact same things. One of them has a certain organizer. The other one has a different organizer. One of them could have thousands of people joining their group and massively successful, and the other will just die on the vine and nothing happens. And by far, the number one reason for that is the energy, the creative skills, the organizational skills kind of the organizer is the difference between success and lack of success. And when an organizer leaves, like sometimes the community dies. So it's also really important for your question is like having a leadership team. I don't know if Jimmy, you have this, but do you have like other people on the team that
yeah, so within each group of 50 guys there's 3 leaders for that group, and so they've voted on by the other members and they kind of help me. And the groups that have those strong leaders definitely do the best, right? They make sure that everybody feels welcome and is showing up, and they're going out of their way to, like if I were to go away tomorrow, most of those groups would still be getting together and things like that. And then it's empowering them, right? Like as the leader of the group, I have them teach. I have them come on and do the weekly calls sometimes. I make sure that they know that they are somebody that the guys can turn to and kind of just empower them that way. And a question I was going to ask you is what makes a great community organizer? You answered a few of those questions: creativity, organization. You guys have the data. What are some of the other things that your best community organizers would do?
Yeah. So the number one item that I think makes for a great community organizer is actually the ability to enable people in the group to feel comfortable. And there's so many things that go into that. So what does that mean? Let's pull that back a step. So the examples are: new person joins. What do you do to welcome that person? How do you help that person to integrate? Now that person shows up to their first event. Is there a person welcoming that first person to be able to come in, or are they kind of left alone? Once the person's there, do you follow up with the person afterwards, say what went well, what didn't went well, go well? And there's not a lot of introverts out there. And community is even more important for introverts than for extroverts. And for introverts, it's scary. It's scary to just show up when you don't know anyone. I remember hearing stories of people that would, drive to, she drove to her meetup event and then she just drove away and she couldn't get out. She just didn't know it. Drove to another one. And then finally, she kind of got out and it just changed everything. So I would just say being a welcoming community organizer, having people feel comfortable, having people feel like it's a safe space, especially in support-related groups. It's so important for people to feel that it's a trusted environment, and creating that kind of environment, to me, that's what's key.
Well, the only members I've ever had to remove is ones that made the container not safe. Either they wouldn't get along with another member, they held things against them, and it wasn't safe for them to fully express themselves at that point. It's funny that you say about making people feel comfortable. So before I started this group, and I think maybe this is my success, why it's been so successful, is I had thrown about 200 parties or events in my life. And I learned this firsthand. I would just go to a party or go to an event and I said, what don't I like? And the number one thing I hated was when people didn't make me feel welcome there. And so anytime I threw a party in college even, I had this genius thing that I did. You'll love this. So most guys, they throw a party and they're very territorial and they're making, new guys show up. They're like, who's this guy? I did the opposite. So whenever any guys would show up, let's say a group of 4 dudes show up at the party, I'd say, guys, welcome. My name's Jimmy. This is my home. Hey, listen, let me introduce you to a couple girls real quick. We all knew 20 girls we'd already dated or weren't getting a date. And so I was like, hey, come here real quick. Let me introduce you to these cool girls, and I'm introducing them first. They're like, who is this guy? So then they felt comfortable. They started calling their girlfriends and bringing them to the party. And before you knew it, I knew everybody in town. And that really was my one thing. And then I had 2 other parts to make people comfortable. That was my whole theory. It was like, if people feel comfortable, they'll stay. So the second one was I always had a theme, because people get to act like somebody and it's not as intimidating. Like if I'm rejected, they're rejecting this persona I'm putting on. It's like this costume. It's why people have Halloween parties, because they can be anybody. And if they get rejected, they're rejecting the dinosaur they're representing, or like whatever, the Troy or whatever. Right. And so I always had themes. And then the third one was I noticed a lot of people when they're uncomfortable at a party, they need something to like calm their nerves. Yeah. So I always had a lot of food. And what I noticed is all the uncomfortable people would always congregate around the food together. Then they start talking and then they became best friends because they're all just uncomfortably connecting together. So those were really the 3 things I said at every party that I would do. And then it really did create, everyone said, like, I just love being at Jimmy's parties. They didn't even know why. I knew exactly why, but they just felt comfortable being there.
That's awesome. And the thing is, it's a butterfly effect. You acted that way, but I'm willing to bet that because you acted that way, there were other people that took your lead.
Totally.
Saw how you were acting. And it's just like any leadership. People learn not just from what people say, people learn from what you do. Kids learn, for example, not just what parents say, they learn from what parents do. And I have no doubt that there were other people that started acting that way.
Oh, yeah.
Just because
the
they
whole
saw
party had
that's
that
how it's done.
vibe, Yeah,
exactly.
And at my events now with my coaches group, it's like if you aren't welcoming, you're going to feel weird. Like you're going to be the weird guy, the odd guy out. But I want to back into this a little bit. You became the CEO again of MeetUp. You'd already had huge success at Seeking Alpha, which is as a real estate agent, I use that company all the time to get information, financial news, and a couple other companies. You were at 1-800-Flowers, and you get over at MeetUp.
I was CEO of Investopedia also.
Oh, Investopedia, right. Another one that I use. Yeah. And you get over to MeetUp. It's such a weird, interesting time. WeWork has just gone through the roof. Please walk us through just being in that place at that time. Because you really got to ride a crazy roller coaster.
Yeah, well said. So for those people who have seen the Apple movie or the Hulu special, did you see either of those things? Or
I have seen it. Yeah, both.
So about WeWork, or read one of the books, The Cult of Wade. People usually ask me the question like, oh, they exaggerated. The reality, couldn't have been like that. And I was like, yeah, it's true. The reality was not like that. Reality was actually much, much crazier. and I can give you an example of how crazy the actual reality was, which is what was in the show, which I'll tell afterwards. But, WeWork, I was drinking the Kool-Aid. Let me start with that. I was not one of these people that I would love to say, I knew it was a house of cards. I knew it wasn't, a real thing. When Adam Nolan spoke, I was just mesmerized frequently. I was like, wow, he's really going to change the world. This is amazing. And so were many other people. When you were at WeWork, it was a very strange situation because WeWork was losing literally billions of dollars, not tens of millions, hundreds, like $1 billion plus it was losing. And when I first joined MeetUp, one of the KPIs, the key performance indicators that Adam and WeWork had for the founder, the CEO, was not like how to grow revenue, not how to grow profit. It was how fast can you hire people and how many people can you actually have in the company. So the company went from basically a break-even business, MeetUp, to losing close to $20 million under WeWork's ownership. And then, of course, Adam Newman was like, well, the guy the founder of MeetUp, again, Scott Heiferman, is not necessarily the right person. We need to find someone else. He had promised Scott that he would tell him. He didn't. Scott actually found out from a friend of his who was approached, which is not exactly the right way to go about doing something. I had an interview with Adam, and then I had interviews with 27 other people during this crazy process. And then finally I took over as the CEO, and it was a complicated situation because WeWork really wanted the founder of MeetUp, Scott, to stay with the company, to stay with MeetUp, because he felt bad. I've known from past experience that, and I like Scott a lot, by the way, that founders tend to have deep emotional bonds to their previous company. He had been running the company for 16 years.
Wow.
Everyone in the company felt a deep connection to him as well. And it would have been very difficult for me to be able to establish my credibility as the decision maker if I had the previous CEO be part of my team. So we were able to engineer him to kind of take a 3-month leave of absence, and that led to some challenges as well. But generally speaking, WeWork was very focused on one thing, which is growth at all costs. At all costs. It didn't matter how much money things were. It didn't matter whether something made sense or didn't make sense. It didn't matter whether there's a good rationale or not. It was just grow. And WeWork is a shell of its former self today. I mean, the story that I would tell is, I don't know if you remember this, but in the show, there was a big gong that they used to hit every single time that someone made a big sale. So someone who I'm very close with, I don't want to say who, but an executive at WeWork once was sitting with me and he showed me stitches in his head. I'm like, oh, why are there stitches in your head? He said, oh, Adam used to pick me up, run as fast as possible, and into the gong, and smash me into the gong. And one time, like, his head split open, basically. Now, that wasn't in the show, but it's an example of just like, frat boy has gone wild.
Dude watched Wolf of Wall Street one too many times, it sounds like.
Exactly.
So, I mean, what was it about Adam that made him so persuasive? Because, I mean, you're a smart CEO. Seeking Alpha, 1-800-FLOWERS, these are companies, Investopedia, that sound pretty boring companies, but very well ran. You can tell, like, you can see that these are very intelligent humans running this. Yeah. You get into WeWork, I mean, essentially, you're at MeetUp, but it's part of WeWork's, umbrella, and you're seeing everything going against what your teachings, what you'd learned in the past said, but for some reason this, it just failed. And I've been in those situations, by the way, and you look back later and you're like, how did I not see it? But you don't see it in the moment. It all feels so normal.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was intentional neglect. So what I mean by that is that, in general in life, you just try to spend your time and energy on things that you feel like you could control. And you try to not pay attention to the things that you can't control. And I was the CEO of MeetUp. I knew that I could control the fate of MeetUp. I could control what the focus is of the company, the strategy, etc. When I saw the crazy shenanigans that are happening at WeWork, I didn't necessarily think the company would collapse, but I tried to not have it be a part of my daily life. For example, at one point they wanted to move MeetUp into WeWork's offices, and I fought that because I wanted to kind of be separate. And so it was kind of intentional neglect around what was actually happening at WeWork. Now, the problem was 100% of my equity was in WeWork stock. So That wasn't good.
So when it crashed, did you lose a lot of that?
Oh, all of it. Yeah. I mean, on my offer letter,
Were you tied up so you couldn't sell?
On my offer letter, the value of the stock, because they put a valuation of the stock, I'm not saying the exact number, but it was well over a couple $1 million. Okay. Huge amount of money. I think when I finally, I bought this stock after invested, I think I got something like $30,000 or something, I mean, multi-million dollars that I could afford. But, again, it's a helpful lesson, because my entire incentive and sphere of control was MeetUp. I didn't have any ability to influence WeWork, yet my entire incentive plan was actually completely the opposite of that, which is kind of an odd situation, which is one of the reasons why when WeWork was falling apart and I was given the opportunity, the president of WeWork called me up to essentially acquire MeetUp out of WeWork. I jumped at the opportunity. So that way you can really align what I'm working on and what my incentives are.
So you guys were basically able to pull yourselves out of WeWork at that point when it was collapsing.
Correct. And there's a famous thing, never fail to take advantage of a crisis. I'm sure you've heard that before. WeWork was under crisis, and they were just desperate to unload all of their different assets. They had numerous assets. They acquired a company called Conductor, which is an SEO agency. They do a lot of other things as well. The founder reacquired it back. There was a number of different examples where people acquired companies, and it was just, you're able to acquire companies on the pennies of the dollar. And it ended up that the person or the couple of people who I brought in to acquire MeetUp out of WeWork, acquiring it for a fraction of what WeWork had paid, the $160 million that MeetUp had paid. And then when we sold the company, they made 800% on their investment over 4 years.
And that was just a couple of years later, I guess, right?
It was
800% return. Wow.
Yeah.
And did you renegotiate for yourself then to get stock the second time when you split off?
I was able to get MeetUp stock and not WeWork stock. So
yeah. Amazing, man. And you're basically retired now. You're enjoying your house there on the lake, you said, right now. And, a guy like you that's been in charge of so many people. By the way, I read in your book, Decide and Conquer. I just picked it up when I got this interview set up. I'm already halfway through. But amazing advice for business owners and CEOs. I really am enjoying it a lot. In fact, I'd be done with it, but I got it on Audible and I had to slow it down. I usually listen at 2 speed. And I was like, I actually want to pay attention to all this. And
you actually want to pay attention? Whoa.
Yeah, no, some good stuff. And usually I just try to
put you on the spot here. What's one learning that you had from the 2x speed, besides the learning to decrease it from 2x to 1.5x?
Well, one that just came to my mind, which is kind of ironic and funny, and it's a lesson that you learned obviously with this too, but you talked about when you took the job at MeetUp, how you really want to negotiate for everything up front. So when you have the most leverage is when you're taking a job, and how you did do that in some terms. And then, but that's one that stood out to me because I kind of laughed with it that you ended up with WeWork stock because you had negotiated probably pretty hard for that stock at that time.
That's exactly right. I was like, forget the base salary. Let's talk about the stock part. And I pushed hard. I got exactly what I wanted, and I ended up, it could have been only $20,000 instead of $30,000. So.
Yeah. Well, another really cool thing I got out of the book was and I'd love for you to share this story is how you got your first job working for a big CEO because some people think that these things just land in their lap, and I'm an expert at getting myself in the room or with the right person. I love to be able to do that, and I just absolutely loved listening to that story and how you did that.
Okay, so here we go. So I was at business school, and I had worked in consulting prior. And I really didn't want to go back to consulting. So I identified about 20, 30 different companies that I thought I'd be interested in working with. And one night, so real companies like JetBlue or pharmacy chain like Dwayne Reed, or a real company like 100 Flowers that does real things, get your hands dirty, not just advise people. One night, I identified the top 50 people at these 30 or so different companies. And I sent an individual email to 1,500 different people. I kid you not, 1,500 different people, individually. Started at 8 p.m., stayed up through the night, 13 straight hours later, and I tried to figure out what the emails were. Because this is, by the way, 20 years ago. This is in 2003, 21 years ago when I was doing business. And I would check, is the email David.Siegel, David_Siegel, D Siegel. So I figured out what the emails were. I sent the email out to people, and I said, I want to become an assistant to the CEO. And I ended up having conversations with Ken Chenault, who at the time was the CEO of American Express, David Stern, who is the commissioner of the National Basketball Association.
Of course.
Jeff Blue, David Nealman. And what happened is, people got annoyed. They're like, we got all of your emails. I'm like, yeah, you got my emails. So, because I sent it to like the CFO, the CRO, the CTO, the VP of engineering, everything. I just blanketed it. I sent it, and they were like, I'm not the person. This is a person. And then I would say, so-and-so recommended I talk to you because, they said this is the person. Anyway, what ended up happening is I was able to work for the CEO of Dwayne Reed. I worked directly as a director of business development for the CEO of Dwayne Reed. But then the fun part of the story is that 3 years later, I saw an ad in the Wharton alumni database, and the ad said 1-800-Flowers looking for an assistant to the CEO. And I thought, that's so cool, because 3 years ago, I had a conversation with Jim McCann trying to convince him to hire me as an assistant CEO. And he said no. So then I sent him a little email and said, hey, Jim, I don't know if this influenced you or you remember our conversation, but, I'd love to grab a coffee and, be your assistant. And he sends me a 5-word email back that just said, I was looking for you. Because he remembered that I went to Wharton, but he didn't remember anything else. So he published me the Wharton alumni thing, and I ended up finding out about it. So I guess the whole point is, and I talk about this in the book a lot, the power of optionality. In that when you get yourself out there and you talk to as many different people as you can, because of community, by the way, that can help to do that, then you have all these little seeds that are planted. And some of the seeds die. Most of the seeds die. But some of the seeds will spring little sprouts, and some of them could spring really big trees. So you just never know what's going to happen by just getting yourself out there. And that's how I knew I wanted to become a CEO, and I knew the best way to become one was to be mentored directly by someone who had been in that business and doing it for many years. And that's kind of what I did in my career.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I loved reading about that. I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to collect autographs from all the baseball players. Oh. And so I got the address of every team and I sent an individual letter to each one of them. And I ended up getting about 60 or 70 players sent me back autographed baseball cards and photos and things. And so kind of reminded me of that when I heard that story a little bit. But.
Well, we're two brothers from the same mother, I have to tell you, because that's not the saying. What's the saying?
Yeah, I got brothers from another mother.
From another
or something
mother.
Like that.
Another mother.
Yeah,
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so I knew something was off that. So when I was a kid, I also wrote letters to baseball players. We must have gotten the same book. I also got the addresses, and I have a couple hundred autographs of these random baseball players. And the funny thing is, I wanted to do something kind of about with my daughter because we have 3 kids. My daughter's still home, and she wanted to get some additional money. So we've been actually selling these autographs on eBay.
It's amazing.
Players. It was just kind of fun. I'm harkening back to the 1980s baseball players, but I did the exact same thing back then.
I love it, man. No, I love when you find a hustler, right? And it's like people think again that these, that you just become the CEO by chance, but it's like you meet enough people, you put yourself out there enough. And I can see why MeetUp was such a perfect marriage for you, but between your past and what that company was, because you really understand the value of community and of like just being able to take chances and be willing to risk something and not worry about, if everybody likes you, but you just put yourself out there and eventually, like you said, a couple of these little seeds will sprout and something amazing can come from it.
Well said. Well said. Thank you.
Yeah. So when you studied with, again, under, some of these amazing CEOs, what are a couple, and just being a CEO, I guess, I'd love to hear a couple of the lessons or just most important things for a CEO to really be effective. Just from your experience, some of the things you saw, and maybe you could even use some of the examples of what you saw not to do with your experience with, some of the other companies like WeWork. But
yeah, no, of course. I mean, one of the principles that I mentioned in the book that you're speed reading through is the concept of be kind, not nice. And I just want to talk about that one because I think it's actually an underappreciated concept for business leaders. most people perceive the best business leaders and CEOs as basically assholes. Like, oh, look at Steve Jobs. He's an asshole. Look at Jeff Bezos. He doesn't seem like the nicest guy. I mean, maybe he is. I don't actually know. That's what you have to be in order to rise up. No, you actually have to have relationships. You have to build relationships. When I say relationship, you have to build relationships with people above you, if you're with colleagues, and you have to build relationships with people who work for you because you want to bring them from one job to another. But so you want to be kind. But one of the problems is sometimes also a lot of leaders mistake the two, and they try to be as nice as possible, and they're like afraid to fire people. They're afraid to tell people what they're working on doesn't make any sense, and they should stop prioritizing that. They're afraid to say to people, give them constructive feedback. They just, don't want to deal with tension. So I think it's finding that right balance where what you're doing is you're not like just being nice so that people feel good all the time, but you're also not being an asshole, and you're kind of being kind. Sometimes the kindest thing you could do is to fire someone. Sometimes the kindest thing you could do is to tell someone, here are the things that you're working on. You need to change your behavior, and here are some very specific suggestions of how to do so. So I would say be kind, not nice is a huge principle for mine in kind of leadership.
Yeah, there's one of my favorite books. It's called No More Mr. Nice Guy, and it's really about because a nice guy is not listening to his instincts. He's not trusting himself. He's self-deceiving so that he doesn't ruffle any feathers. He's afraid of conflict, so he doesn't make the right move. Whereas kind, it's like, no, you make the right move. You just do it in a kind way. You don't have to be an asshole when you do it.
Exactly. No assholes allowed. If you want another concept, one of my deep beliefs is in the concept of kind of upside down organizational chart. What I mean by that is the CEO is in the bottom of the chart. My job is not to tell everyone what to do. And it sounds like, Jimmy, you get that because you're all about people empowerment, but it's to enable the success of each of the people who work for me. Because if my CFO, CRO, CTO, CPO, if they set of sales, if they are all successful, I'm successful. I don't need to be successful. I don't need to do anything to be successful. I literally need to do nothing to be successful except for to make every person who works for me as successful as possible. It's that simple. So I think the concept of working for your people and ending your one-on-ones with people and saying, what can I do to help you to enable you to be more successful? Sometimes being successful means giving them critical feedback. Of course, sometimes it means giving them space and empowering them. Sometimes it means saying, I'm going to direct you because this is what we need to be doing. And I know that you don't want to be directed, but this is actually in your best interest for you to succeed. So I'm going to be more directive right now. And I know that makes you feel uncomfortable, and to acknowledge that. But it's really a simple formula. Just make the people who work for you deeply successful. Make sure that their job is to make the people who work for them deeply successful. You got a good, successful company.
That's pretty good. So, I mean, you seem like a guy that, uses a lot of data and things like that as well. Obviously, as a CEO, you're getting all the reports and everything. How much did you go off of gut instinct versus you went off of data that was provided to you?
Yeah, great question. So I think I'm going to separate that into two different parts. The gut instinct would be, from a strategy standpoint, we would come up with what is like a new revenue stream. What is a new way that we could approach our customers to make the experience better on MeetUp or whatever it is. We definitely went more on gut in terms of thinking about what we should do. However, we would then, this is really important, we would then roll it out and then either keep it or kill it completely based on data. So I'm data obsessed. So when we rolled anything out, if we were measuring beyond and many different permutations, ABC testing up to wazoo, everything that we ultimately did. And if something didn't succeed, we obviously pulled it back. So what I would say is strategy in terms of, testing out different hypotheses, we would do based on gut, but then the actual testing of the hypothesis to see whether something made sense or didn't make sense, it was all completely data driven. And you can't have any emotional connection to it. The data tells us it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. But I'm not a big believer in just let's do whatever our customers tell us. At times you need to kind of think for yourself what the best approach is. the famous saying by Henry Ford, if I listened to what my customers told me, then I would have made a faster horse.
Right.
So you got to think about bigger picture broadly, but then ultimately analyze everything in a very, very data-driven way.
Yeah. No, I quit using surveys for my events because I was starting to realize they don't understand what I do about why that was an important part of the weekend,
Correct.
why that was an important part of the event. They're like, we hated the hour drive to get to where we were going. I'm like, guys, what you don't realize is I purposely had you guys in a car with 5 of you. I made you carpool. Yes, because it was the most connected time. And by the time they've been in the program a year, they kind of get it. They're like, oh, yeah. They start telling about their favorite experience of the weekend is always the car drive. I'm like, yeah, now you get the genius behind it, And I make all 50 of them sleep in one house. We get these huge Airbnbs. And sometimes they're like, the beds suck. And it's like, yeah, but there's something to be said for all being crammed into this house where you're forced to just be in each other's worlds the whole time.
I love it. I always say the difference between hearing and listening. You want to hear what people say, but you don't necessarily want to listen to them.
That's fair. What was the worst decision you ever made as a CEO, if you don't mind my asking?
Sure. I think what I have found is because I'm an ambitious person and because I really want to rise through ranks at a young age, ego at times infiltrated my decision process, and too frequently, I would make decisions that were better for me, David Siegel, excuse me for speaking in third person because everyone hates when no one does that. I did things that were better for me rather than better for the company. And an example of that is I was at Duane Reade, which is a pharmacy chain in the New York metro area acquired by Walgreens for a couple $2 billion. And I was running business development or starting a business there. And we developed this new technology around called a pharmacy kiosk where people can scan their prescription and then get it delivered to their home. Bottom line is the technology didn't work. I kept expanding it because I was growing revenue faster that way. I was able to hire more people that way. I went from having 3 people to having like 40 or 50 people, went from small revenue, like $15-20 million revenue. And ultimately the thing just completely fell apart. Business was shut down. And I think it's a typical example of the disincentives that exist sometimes in businesses where people want to grow business areas, not because it's in the best interest of the business, but because it's in their own best interest. And that's extremely insidious, extremely dangerous. And I would say most of my mistakes typically were around kind of ego-driven, issues, which is definitely a problem. The others, I would say, mistakes that I made, which again, you may have heard in listening to the book, was around, I have always deeply believed in empowering people to make smart decisions and letting people figure things out. But sometimes things are so effed up in an organization, you can't just let everyone else figure out and run amok. You need to be a lot more directive. There's a famous thing that Ben Horowitz talks about in The Hard Thing About Hard Things, wartime CEO versus a peacetime CEO. I'm sure you've heard that kind of concept before. And there's a time to be a wartime CEO and time to be a peacetime CEO. And I had to kind of go against my natural inclination to want to empower people, to want to make people feel good, to want people to feel motivated. And I knew that the only way we could succeed at MeetUp was for me to actually be a wartime CEO and just kind of be a lot stronger willed, having people disagree with me and still say, we got to move forward with this. And I think almost being too nice has been also a mistake of mine that I've tried to learn from.
Yeah, no, it's very well said. And since I asked you your worst decision, maybe your best decision you ever made as a CEO.
Best decision?
Or maybe one of the hardest decisions where you made the right call or something like, just something that was, you look back and you're just really proud of the way that you handled something.
Yeah. Okay. So one that I tend to like to focus on, because we mentioned terminating employees, is it's really, really hard to come into a company like MeetUp where people are deeply connected to the mission, but we're losing so much money and decide that you have to fire people. And I'm really proud of, first I made a mistake and I had a layoff, and I laid off, let's say 20 or 25 people out of the 250 people. And because again, I was being too nice. That was a bad decision. Okay.
The ones you should have laid off that you didn't probably got really loud at that point too, I'm guessing.
Oh my, exactly. It just created much more chaos. Then I had a second round list where I think we laid off like 75 people. And it's the way that I handled that I feel really proud of, and that we had numerous other hiring managers available to people that were laid off. We were very open and direct. We were very generous in the kind of packages that we gave people. But I would say that I went stronger and more aggressively in the layoffs than most people felt comfortable with. And ultimately, that got the company to be a break-even business, which kept the company afloat during COVID. And then ultimately, the company went from a $20 million loss to about an $8 million positive profit before we sold the company. So I think making those kind of hard decisions, which are uncomfortable, is probably something I'm very proud of.
Yeah. Well, those are the toughest decisions because there's real people involved in it.
Exactly.
What feels right isn't necessarily what is right. I wanted to be a franchise owner of a Keller Williams franchise, which, is a huge real estate company. And I was qualified in every single way, my production, my time, my everything I'd done. Except when I took their test, they have a test to decide if you can be the franchise owner. And one of the things that I came back really poorly on is my ability to make those kinds of decisions because I cared too much what people thought of me. And so that actually kind of disqualified me from being able to be a franchise owner, because you have to be able to be ruthless and not feel bad about it, essentially.
It's hard because if you are kind of an inherently nice person like you are, it's really uncomfortable to feel ruthless. But that's why you have to have the mindset of like, hey, I'm doing this to actually save the jobs of everyone else. I'm doing this to have a sustainable business. And and unfortunately, a lot of people hated me. A lot of people at MeetUp really, really disliked me, and they still do. And that just goes to the territory.
Well, and you learn as you get older. I think when I was coming up, I tried to say yes to everything, but then it's like, wait, when I'm saying yes to this, I'm saying no to more important things. I'm saying no to people I want to be with. And, even with me, I would feel guilty. This is something I've had to learn is like, even like if I'd be on a, on a date and I get a text, I would feel guilty not texting the person back. And it's like, wait, no, be present. Like you just have to kind of get some of these lessons the hard way, but overcoming that feeling of like, wait, what is the greater good here? And I'm not doing any favors to these people if I'm not being present wherever I am.
It's hard because I have dozens of people a week that reach out to me, and I hate to be that guy that just like ignores them or thinks my time is too valuable to get together with them. But ultimately, I'm not taking care of myself and I'm not doing the right thing. So I've started to, rather than just ignoring people, just say, I apologize. I'm not going to be able to get together. My focus right now is on taking care of myself. I hope you understand. And people are like, okay, good. I appreciate that. But yeah, I don't feel comfortable ignoring people, but I do feel comfortable saying no. And I'm just saying no a lot more often. And it's very different than what I'm used to doing.
Well, it's the line I came up with. I think you'll like this. Is very similar. I feel like we have a lot of things in common here. But I say to people, I say, hey, thank you for thinking of me. I'm spending all my time, money, and attention on my own projects right now, so I just don't have time.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's like it leaves you nowhere to go. It's not mean. They go, oh, dude's pretty focused right now. Okay, I guess I'll catch you at another time. But
exactly.
Well, David, for people that want, I know you're also a professor at Columbia, but for people that want to learn more from you or follow your journey, where's the best place for us to send them?
Thank you. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm definitely very active on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to go. You can look at me on Twitter, at David Mayer Siegel. My middle name is Neir Siegel. But I would say LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me. And people can check out the book, Decide and Conquer. I had a podcast at one point called Keep Connected, all about the power of community. So, check that out too.
Awesome, man. Well, I could talk to you all day. I appreciate you and thank you for this time.
Jimmy, you're the man. I loved our conversation and thank you so much.
All right, man. Take care.
Bye-bye.